Ken Trom of Atlantic Richfield. This is Standard Oil. Of course, you recognize ARCO, Atlantic Richfield Standard Oil Company, one of America's greats back in those early days. And the different oil companies, Texaco, Shell, Standard Oil, and Chevron, basically divided up the Arab world. And each one of them took a country and said, we will go and produce the oil fields in that country. The Arabs didn't have the money to produce them. And Mr. Ken Trom was given the job by Atlantic Richfield of producing the oil field in Kuwait, Dubai, and that part of the world. Ken Trom is a gentleman who has given me so much information over the years. We spent hours and hours together talking about what is happening in the Arab world, and which I'll go back and give in detail later. Now, about 1977 through 81 was the Carter administration. You'll remember that the Secretary of State was Mr. Henry Kissinger. He traveled abroad to every major oil-producing country at that time and tried to cut them a deal. I will go into that deal that he cut and why it is so significant to what's happening in America right now, because at that point, we began the indebtedness of the United States of America by a design plan, and I'm so glad that Alex mentioned the 50-year cycle, because this is exactly what we are going through at this time. I had not thought of that, but Alex, you're right, and I have heard this in many places. At this point, OPEC had an agreement, and there was every nation in OPEC, every major oil-producing country in OPEC, agreed to Henry Kissinger's deal with the exception of two. One was Iraq, and that's the reason that Iraq had to be conquered and taken out, and the next one was Iran. Iran has had every kind of problem imaginable because they would not go along with Mr. Henry Kissinger's agreement back in 1977 through 81. Now, at this point, America began its debt spiral, and someone needed to buy the United States debt. Mr. Kissinger knew this, and as a result, the part of the cutting of the deal was that they would buy our T-bills, buy our debt. In turn, we would buy their oil, and at this point, it was decided by the elite that the American oil fields would not be produced. Folks, I hope you're hearing this because it's so significant to what they have told me now is about to happen. The American oil fields would not be produced because the foreigners, we had to buy our oil from them in order for them to turn around and buy our national debt, and they had to keep it that way. They closed up oil wells everywhere. They shut down major production from the Arctic Wildlife Refuge. What was the Bakken Oil Preserve and others here in the Lower 48, they likewise said, we cannot produce them because if we do, then these other countries will not be obligated to buy our debt. This also began the time that the elitists, the bankers and others, the World Bank, the IMF, began to bring about the destruction of America gradually. You've heard me speak of the Devil's Messiah plan. Every bit of this fit into their perversion of the United States of America. Then came 1970. I'm just giving you a quick overview, and then we'll go back since we have time in the program today to take these one by one. In 1970, the Alaskan oil was found, somewhere around 1970. In 1974 through 76, the Trans-Alaska Oil Pipeline was built. And in 1976, one of the largest oil fields ever discovered in the world, and in particular in the United States of America, it's described in my book, The Energy Non-Crisis. Gull Island will blow your mind. This is a story within itself because after Gull Island was brought in, I was in the room with the oil company officials. I later asked Mr. Trom, why don't you bring this oil to the American people? I knew already why. They couldn't. They had no choice. They could not bring gasoline back down to 25 cents a gallon again. They could not bring it to 50 or 60 cents a gallon. They couldn't because the national debt had to be bought by someone. The Federal Reserve was obligated, and the national debt was growing so greatly. And now Gull Islands brought in, and I said to Ken, why don't you bring this oil to the American people? He said, Chaplain, this is classified. We are not going to release that oil. We will never announce the oil field and the Arctic Wildlife Refuge, what is there, until, please, this is so important, put it down in your notes. You're hearing things today for the first time. He said, we will not produce these oil fields until we have crude oil to somewhere around $200 a barrel. I said that in different places. It got me in trouble. I later was called on the carpet by the elite, and I was threatened, and it was mainly because of this one subject right here. They had to get it to $200 a barrel. You are going to see $150 to $200 a barrel oil in the very near future. You're probably talking somewhere in the neighborhood of 9 to 12 months. They have to take it there because the problems that have developed, they developed them, by the way. The problems and the crisis that they have developed in the Middle East will grow so great until America will not be able to get its oil from the OPEC oil-producing countries of the Middle East and Saudi Arabia in particular.
Okay, thank you for joining us. Pastor Lindsey Williams worked in the board meetings with Atlantic Richfield and in meetings with other top oil companies. Just like in Congress or on an aircraft carrier, the chaplain is like an intermediary and was able to see all this. He wrote a book about it. Since then, 30 years later, everything in that book, The Energy Non-Crisis, is now out in the open. That they could have dozens of pipelines coming out of Alaska, supplying the entire United States for over 100 years. It's easily recoverable oil. It's there. They capped it. Now, since then, he has these two sources, one a former CEO, and I know for new listeners been listening the whole time here, like we've already heard this. I'm recapping for new listeners. People are tuning in, in and out constantly. Then, starting about 3.5 years ago, Ken Fromm and the other fellow started telling him basically the same information, that oil would go from $50 a barrel up to $150. Then people thought it would go to $200. His source said no. Now it's going to plunge down to $40. It went below $40, like $32. I saw it. Then he said for 2 years it's going to be basically just gradually going up slowly. Enjoy yourselves. Go out and have plenty of gas. But in 2 years, get ready. We're now 2 years later. 4 months ago, Lindsey says they're going to have a crisis in the Middle East. And I said, war? He said, no, my sources just said it's going to be in turmoil, but that is a trigger and a distraction from China. Watch it. It's the big one. But they didn't go further. Now Mr. Fromm has died. The other source, it has gone all the way with the entire plan. And we can see the plan of deindustrialization, moving all the jobs to China. China in the news today, secretly pressuring the U.S. government as holders of our debt to allow them to buy up U.S. companies and block SEC corruption probes and antitrust issues. This is about the globalists teaming up with China and muscling out the U.S. This is about the designed decline of the U.S., and Lindsey's going to lay it all out now. Lindsey, let's start back at the Middle East, the planned program there, that's admitted, where this is going, how it's going to unfold. You have the floor for the next 10 minutes.
The standard currency of the world is crude oil. Please write this down in your notes, and I hope you have a pencil and paper and you're taking notes today, and you'll put it beside your calendar, because barring divine intervention, the elite will do what you're about to hear. The standard currency of the world is crude oil. It is not the dollar. It's not the euro. It's not the won. It's not the pound. It's crude oil. Crude oil. Please put it down. It's the most important object out there. The Muslim Brotherhood are being supported by the elite of the world who have the crude oil in the palm of their hand. Please note this. What you saw happen in Egypt, what's happening right now in Libya, what is taking place in the United Arab Emirates, is going to spread throughout the entire Arab world. Most all of OPEC. Now, OPEC includes a few other nations beside the Arab world. But all over the Arab world, it's going to continue because they are being supported by the elite of the world. The elite of the world plan to double-cross the Arabs. I hope you've never heard this anywhere before. This will be so new to you until I'm sure you're going to be startled, as you have by many of the other things that these people have told me. Please note again, the Arab world, the Middle East in particular, OPEC in general, are going to be double-crossed by the elite of the world. And if any of the Arabs out there are listening to me, I hope your princes, your sheikhs and your sheiks and the people of those countries will listen to you, because 70 years ago you were nothing but nomads, roaming the deserts riding camels. You're going back to that again.